Area and perimeter, a parent's guide. A number of parents have been helping their children, and I just thought it would be helpful if you understood exactly what your children are learning in class about area and perimeter. First of all, let's take a look at this, which students have been taught to think about. Perimeter is the fence and area is the yard. This is a handy little sentence that will help them remember which one is which. And if you think about it, it's easy to see in this picture that the fence, or going around here, circles the yard in the green, the play yard. So when students see this, they can visualize that the perimeter is the outside edge of the shape. Now, when it comes to figuring out what the perimeter and area is, sometimes this is where students will get stuck. And it's important to remind them of that sentence. Now, I've asked the students to try labeling their work. So if they count the sides, in this case this is centimeter grid paper, so the measurement in this case would be in centimeters. So if you count the number of centimeter grids that the shape covers, you can easily see the sides. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this side has 7, and this side also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 centimeters. Now, in addition to that, students are reminded that they do have to put in the opposite sides. So if we take this, and I'm going to copy it and drag it over, because all opposite sides on a rectangle or a square will have the same measurements. Now, if you get into some other shapes, obviously that may not be the case, but for now students are only working on rectangular shapes. So you can see on this square, each side is 7 centimeters. Now, when students are asked to figure out the perimeter of a shape, they need to make sure, first of all, that they have notated the length of every side. Often students will only put the distance on the length of 2 of the sides, which then makes them get all confused. So the first thing that students need to remember to do is to make sure that they have labeled all of the sides. Now, to find the perimeter is an addition problem typically. They would add all 4 sides together. So you can see that 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 is equal to 28 square units, or in this case it would be 28 square centimeters. What often students will do is they'll multiply, which obviously is not correct, unless, of course, they're multiplying 2 sides. So they might, in this case, instead of adding 7 4 times, they would just multiply 7 4 times, which is a more efficient way, and some students are able to make that change. Some students still want to do the addition, and that's fine at this point as well. Now, once we talk about area, we remind them that all year long, we have been talking about arrays. When we learned multiplication, students learned that there are 7 rows of 7 in each row. So area is not that big of an advancement from what we've been doing all along. And I just remind them that the area is how many rows of how many squares. So if they take a look at this, they can see here's a row of 7, another row of 7, another row of 7, and there are 7 rows of 7. Therefore, you use simple multiplication, 7 rows of 7, 7 rows of 7, which is the same as 7 times 7, which is equal to 49 square centimeters. Now, one thing I want to note to you is that students are trying to remember that area is noted in square centimeters. However, perimeter is in linear units, which I obviously have incorrect here, I just noticed that, is in linear units, and therefore it would be just units or centimeters in this case. So in this one, it would be 28 units or 28 centimeters, since these are centimeter spaces. This is a centimeter. And the reason for that is, if you think about taking a fence, for example, and you take fencing and you've got a long strip of fencing, you would need 28 centimeters of fencing, small fence, 28 centimeters of fencing to go all the way around this square. Now, students are also beginning to learn that if you take the same perimeter of a rectangle, but change the configuration of the rectangle, the area changes also. And here's an example of what I'm talking about. You can take a look at this rectangle, which is 1 centimeter long, wide, and long, and then 8 centimeters long, and the area is 8 square centimeters. If you take those same 18 centimeter perimeter, 6 plus 6 plus 3 plus 3 is 18, and you make it 3 centimeters long and 6 centimeters wide, you get an area of 18 square centimeters. And finally, here's another 18 centimeters long. You've got 5 plus 5 plus 4 plus 4, which is 18 centimeters long. So you've got a perimeter of 18. But you've got 4 centimeters long, and 5 centimeters wide for a total area of 20 square centimeters. So what students are recognizing is that while the perimeter stays the same, the closer to a square the shape is, the larger the area. So if you spread out that perimeter, you stretch it out, it's a much smaller area than it is if you make it more like a square. And obviously the reverse is true, is that if you have a larger area that's more like a square, then the perimeter would be that way. Now, what can you do to help your child when they're working on perimeter? First of all, you can ask him or her to think about what perimeter and area are. Help them remember the fence is the perimeter is the fence, and the area is the yard. And ask them to explain what that means. Second thing is, make sure that your child labels the perimeter of a shape. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if they only do 2 sides, they get very confused and often will mix up perimeter and area, or multiplication and addition too. And third thing you can do is to ask your child to think about how perimeter and area are calculated, but don't tell them. This is not a memorization piece, this is an understanding piece. And if you tell them the answer without making them figure it out, they are not as likely to remember it and understand it as if they have to figure it out on their own. They do know how to do this. Again, remind the child to think about what the words mean and what calculation would make sense. If you're going around the entire outside of a yard with a single piece of fencing, it would make sense that you would have to add up all of the sides together. And then 4 is have your child write a number sentence to show how they calculated the area or the perimeter. That starts helping solidify these 2 concepts in their minds. And finally, anytime you've got an opportunity to let them practice this at home. For example, maybe you want to say, I need to make a pan of brownies, and I cut the brownies up into 16 squares. Have them tell you, what's the perimeter of my brownie pan? What's the perimeter? What's the area? What's the area of the brownies? And have them think about things like that. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and I hope this is a help. Bye.